Hi, hello there. This is Dr. Samurai, a professor in Japan specializing in international social pathology. And as usual, this is my diploma, with which I am teaching at private university. The topic of my minute lecture today is Mr. Saragoza Sanchez. I am pretty much sure most of you do not know Mr. Saragoza's name, but those of you who have been following this, my prison friend, profiles, already know that prison gang of Mexican people in California. Another part is pretty much controlled by Nuestra Familia, NF. He is a captain, or was a captain in Nuestra Familia. His nickname is Capone. It's like this. He was arrested because he trusted one guy, and he gave the meth to the guy in advance without any payment. That means after he have sold all those meth, he will pay Mr. Saragoza back. That was the promise. But for some reason, as you see on movies and TVs, he couldn't pay back. So as a boss in that area, he has to do something. Otherwise, all the rest will do the same thing. So he ordered one of his soldiers to go pick that guy up, which he did. And when the car stopped at the intersection close to the police station, you know what happened. That guy jumped off of the van and ran into the police station for protection. For this, he first received 223 years, but later 112 years was added to that. That means 335 years in total. 335. Because he, abducted and confined him in that car on their way to his office. And right now he is serving that 335 years at one of the California prison, state prison. Okay? And I would like to get into some details. Okay? We have been in touch for long years, on and off. It started when Fidel, one of the captain who was very close to become a general, got out of the prison. I started to contact him. I, at the time, wanted to know what makes up the so-called most dangerous people. In other words, like, America's most wanted level people. So I wanted to communicate with only extreme people. Mr. Saragoza was chosen one of them. You know why? Because the mugshot on the website, they have a lot of mugshots of those incarcerated, right? Mr. Saragoza's mugshot is like this. He didn't even see the camera. And it's a funny thing, but if you don't look at the camera, when you see the person actually in person, it's very difficult to tell that was him. That's one thing. And also, it was one way of denying the authority. Because taking a picture, right, to enter prison, but he doesn't even look at the camera and look at the other way. And I liked it very much. I'm sorry, but I'm a little bit weird guy too. As ex-FBI investigator John Douglas said, when you see the dark side is watching you back, I just kind of liked his crooked side. So I started to contact him, right? I was trying to be honest, so I mentioned that. I said something like, you were cool, and the mugshot don't not even looking at the camera, Honestly, I know drug is bad. Everybody knows it's bad, right? But I kind of honestly thought and felt, see, Mr. Saragoza gave this merchandise to this person without pay, only on credit, right? But this guy didn't pay Mr. Saragoza back. I know it is an illegal substance, but I thought the other guy is worse than Mr. Saragoza, to be honest. Maybe Mr. Saragoza was arrested was right thing, but the other guy should get longer sentence. That's my feeling, Anyway, even if it was illegal thing, Mr. Saragoza, did him a favor, and he didn't pay it back, and no blame on him. I don't think that is right, honestly. So I wrote the things like that. But at the same time, I'm saying I'm not approving drugs, especially methamphetamine, because that leads to, hallucinatory, voices, which I know very well from my counseling. But I don't want to be too long, but in my mind, this type of guy who doesn't pay back, and also those guys who sell, fake drugs, they are the worst ones, because once the addicted shoot at the fake things up, he could die, There should be stairs, orders of severity of crime. Anyway, Mr. Saragoza was a very nice person in person. He, in his letter wrote, he was, ready to be incarcerated in isolation for the rest of his life. I think at that time he was 40 years old and stuff. He still woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning on his own, even before getting up time designated by the Pelican Bay. Did push-ups and sit-ups and those self-training and, clean his sweat. And then he starts his day by reading books that is instructive. So he was like a trainee monk in a gangster world. And I was impressed by his creed. When I asked him, what do you think about that addition of 112 years to 223? And he laughed, and I only have 200 years, and I couldn't even live for 200 years. So another 100 years addition doesn't mean a shit. That's what he said, my prison friend. I drove up to Pelican Bay from San Francisco. My rent-a-car took a while, like 8 hours, 7 hours. It's far away, close to Oregon, border. Most of the prisons are at rural places, away from towns where so many people do things actively. And he was a very nice guy, because he even shaved his hair for me so that I could see his N tattoo on his head. He was very courteous to me. And then we talked for about 3 hours across that, plastic glass with the phone. And it was kind of, I still remember he wiped that phone for about 30 seconds or so, very carefully. I did not have that much knowledge about, that type of, vegetation. But now I understand, like people, they put that receiver, in between their shoulders and cheek, and kept talking into that receiver for 3 hours. It's like a concentration of germ. So, after I learned from Mr. Saragoza about that cleaning, I started to follow that. And I appreciate, his lesson. But anyway, yeah, we talked about, various things, and I kind of felt sorry that I couldn't provide him anything, any food and any drink, because he was in isolations. It's like he was an elite. You know what Pelican Bay means? That is called the University of Criminals. It's at the very north of California. Holds only top-level gangsters and criminals who can give order to others outside. In other words, say the one is a gang leader. He is in charge of one whole city outside, and he gives order to his soldiers from Pelican Bay. So it is a facility for bosses of gangsters in California, highest in California. So still there's a general population, gen pop, where people can mingle with each other, and there are isolated cells for like Mr. Saragoza. Of course, the isolated ones are better, right? So I guess Mr. Saragoza was considered bad of the baddest, or baddest of the bad. Anyway, I talk about this, so many things, but nothing special, and I drove back down to San Francisco, taking Route 5, about 8 hours, and continuously, keep writing to him. We have a good chemistry. However, there was one big change in Mr. Zaragoza's life. What do you think it was? It's like this. Before, there was no limit in California for how long the inmates can be placed in isolation. So Mr. Fidel was in isolation for 20 years, 20. Most of the people gone crazy without nobody to talk to every day in and day out. And there were multiple of people like that, not as many as 20 years, but long enough. And they didn't like it. So they kind of passed kites, kites, right? That miniature message, which is filled with the tiny, teeny letters, and roll it and put it in a rectum and pass it to others. They pass the same message in multiple kites so that it should be okay. Even some of them were caught and stopped. Anyway, they kind of got set up this network across the California prison system. And about 10,000 inmates across the California prison did boycott, sabotaged by not eating foods, hunger strike. And Mr. Saragoza said he joined one too. 10,000 inmates. And this is the kind of thing that moves administration of a public office. So, as a result, they put the limit on isolation. The maximum is 5 years. So, Mr. Zaragoza, stay in his isolated cell already past 5 years. So, he is, eligible to be out. He was so happy. I honestly laughed because it's not like he is released, okay? He has to serve life. He is a lifer. That is an unchangeable fact. But he can be in jump up with other inmates. That means as good as being released to society to Mr. Saragoza. And also I told you, prison gang is like, the one who controls inside the prison. They walk, everybody bow down or, avoid contacting eyes. And he has tons of friends from the same neighborhood and stuff once he moves from Pelican Bay, which is so north. So he was happy like a crazy little puppy. And I laughed at it. And the contents of our communication naturally focused on it for several times, like, hey, two guys on the same floor, was transferred last week. And hey, you know what? Who was still left on the same floor is, including me, only a few people. But, since he heard that news about his transfer, it only took over half a year. I think he was transferred, I think, as the 83rd or 2nd transfer. And there were, only like 80 something isolated prisoners in Pelican Bay. So he was transferred in the very end, That I smiled too. But anyway, it's a big life change to him, although he made a solid resolution one time to live in isolation for the rest of his life. Now he can mingle with other friends whom he knows from little childhood, right? And the same hood. But I guess because he was, 80th transfer or something means, again, he was the baddest of the bad in the mind of the, CDCR, California Department of Correction and Rehabilitation. He was the baddest of bad. I think he was at the time moved to Pleasant Valley State Prison. I have been there before for some other reason, and I remember it was like 6 hours or 7 hours drive down from San Francisco. Hot area in a desert, but the new prison, good atmosphere, in the visiting room and stuff. Then suddenly his correspondence stopped. But I am trying to be a kind of person who try not to want anything. I just wait till, the other party want me. As being a teacher for 35 years now, that's part of my nature. I just wait until my students need me. At last, one letter came in a year after or so, and that said, I'm sorry, for this long time no writing. But to be honest, I have been so happy and busy, in this new life, so I just didn't feel like facing at the desk to write a letter. He is an honest person and I appreciate it. Probably he was, running around in Pleasant Valley, like a little puppy with his friend. I was rather appreciative to his openness. But the story goes on, okay? Because we've been in touch on and off for over 10 years now. Gradually, his conditions have started to change. I think this is happening even outside society within the many companies. Even in the Nuestra Familia, a huge organization in charge of the half California, there are more people into self-centered interests, advancement in the organizational ladder, and also, self-preservation. Fidel used to say things like that too, but it started out all for protection of, northern Mexican people. But now, it's often the case with the companies. Everybody is interested in his own interest, and especially each of them is a real criminal, not just a gangster, but a prison gang, okay? So some people, kiss asses all the time, just to be, promoted to a higher position. And once he gets the position, he started to be oppressive to the lowers. That position is not proved by what he achieved, right? You understand this? He is just liked by the one in power, and he didn't prove anything, and he doesn't even have the ability to be at the position probably, but he just want to be higher than them, give them the orders. That Mr. Saragoza started to feel that as well, and he wrote, he didn't write anything directly. He just write things indirectly. He goes like, all I can do is just go the way I can go. I believe is right. And I can never bend my creed, even if those who share that creed is becoming such a small minority. But he also wrote those who are tied by their greeds. That tie is very fragile because it's always based on external success, right? They cannot always be successful. Those grouping together does not mean they are on good terms all the time, and they are very easy to be partied with. He said, I have only, one way to go, and I have to be prepared, physically and mentally. That's all he said, But I know he means what he meant, because he's the kind of guy who is taking care of a daughter of his friend who passed away, just the same as his other kids. No difference, no distinctions, because he grew up on his own since he was 12 or so. He understands how that girl felt, I think, to be alone. So he's not cheap, All I said to him was, hey, if you think it is the right way and you are sure about it, even if all the rest of the million people are, confronting you and standing against you, you should go. And I am on your side spiritually. And that's what I believe in too. He said, thank you for understanding my situation. He is a true gangster, All I know is he is a real one. One time I said, have you ever done gang banging before? Real, like a drive-by shootings and stuff? And he said, yes. How did you feel? I asked. And he goes, funny thing is, real bullets are kind of flying very close to me, right? I was supposed to be scared of it, but honestly, I was excited, and I kind of liked it. And I think he was the one who said that many people stop fighting once they see bloods on their own body. Me, I never stop seeing the blood. That is the beginning, Seeing the blood is the beginning of my fight. That is the big difference between the ordinary gangsters who, ran away to a police station and those who is transferred at 83rd or stuff like that. He is all the way in everything he does. I started to understand it must be very difficult to see those without having such guts and experiences, and he's sure they will back off once they really fight and stuff. They want to have higher position than him and give him an order which they don't deserve. It must be very difficult because I experienced similar things in my school politics too. Although I try to stay away from those things, I'm just focusing on my students and on my research. And I think Mr. Saragoza is about the same too. He is he's in his 40s still. He shares the same values as Mr. Fidel, his senior, who already retired. OG was, Fidel liked and entered into NF, in the very beginning. He thought that camaraderie of the Nuestra Familia was very comfortable to be at. Although much younger than Mr. Fidel, Mr. Saragoza shares the same value and try to put such values before money and position, status, materials, and all those things. So I am very happy to know real one like him, doesn't even look at the camera straightforward, share the same value as with mine. And that is my prison friend report this time. I hope you enjoyed, although the story was not smooth this time. Up until next time, please have a wonderful time. Okay? Bye bye now.